Fox News alert the longest-serving member of Congress, Democrat John Conyers of Michigan, denying he ever made any sexual harassment settlements, saying he knows nothing about the claims first reported by BuzzFeed News. The website reporting Conyers settled a complaint back in 2015 from a woman who alleged she was fired because she rejected his sexual advances. But the veteran lawmaker says he only learned about the story today. This is Outnumbered. Let's see. Tuesday? It's Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. I'm Sandra Smith here today, the anchor of the Intelligence Report on Fox Business. Trish Regan is here. Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, former deputy spokesperson for the State Department Marie Harf, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, Fox and Friends weekend co-host and senior political analyst Pete Hegseth. And he is outnumbered, and it is good to have you. And yes, so we're all confirmed. It is Tuesday.
But we're all thinking about Thursday.
Right. It's definitely a holiday week.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. All right. It is a busy news week indeed. Longtime Congressman John Conyers is disputing a report about a sexual harassment settlement. He says he knows nothing about claims of inappropriate touching and only learned of the story today. Earlier, BuzzFeed News reported the Michigan Democrat settled a complaint in 2015 from a woman who alleged she was fired because she rejected his sexual advances. It says his office paid her over $27,000 to settle the complaint under a confidentiality agreement. The 88-year-old Conyers is the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee and the longest-serving current member of the House. And Conyers is not the only one in the spotlight. CBS News suspending Charlie Rose over sexual misconduct allegations from 8 women, and PBS immediately stopping distribution of The Charlie Rose Show. Meantime, Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore still dealing with a string of accusations from women as well. Peter Ducey live from Washington for more on all of this. Peter?
Sandra, the Democratic congressman accused of settling a sexual harassment case in that BuzzFeed article, John Conyers, just answered his door in Detroit and told an Associated Press reporter who was knocking that he doesn't know anything about a sexual harassment complaint by a staffer or a settlement. The former Speaker of the House, John Boehner, says he didn't know anything about this either. The current House Speaker, Paul Ryan, says this report is extremely troubling. And House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, when asked if she knows anything about Conyers settling a suit, says this: no, the current process includes the signing of non-disclosure agreements by the parties involved. Congresswoman Jackie Speer has introduced legislation that will provide much-needed transparency on these agreements and make other critical reforms. I strongly support her efforts. The Conyers denial comes as the Office of Congressional Compliance announced they've paid out $17 million taxpayer dollars over the last 20 years to settle cases connected to sexual harassment as well as other workplace disputes. Congresswoman Diana DeGette is also now coming forward accusing a former Democratic Congressman Bob Filner of trying to kiss her in an elevator on Capitol Hill. On the other side of the Capitol, meanwhile, Senator Al Franken has remained out of sight and quiet since responding to allegations of sexual misconduct with written apologies last week. But today, Franken is getting new support from 36 women who say they worked with him on SNL and who say that he never mistreated them. The Senate hopeful Roy Moore is responding again to allegations of sexual misconduct against him, trying now again to discredit accusers. In this statement from an advisor, quote, the days of unbiased reporting are over. The liberal media will dodge any source and refuse to air any interview that doesn't square with their effort to land a liberal Democrat in the Senate seat. And in the media world, CBS anchor Charlie Rose is apologizing for past behavior. His co-anchors today sympathized with his accusers, and they're upset about the entire situation. Gayle King, the other co-anchor, said she only got an hour and 42 minutes of sleep last night. Sandra.
All right, Peter Ducey, thank you. More and more women are coming forward in recent weeks with accusations of sexual misconduct. And as Peter briefly mentioned, now for the first time, one lawmaker is publicly naming her alleged harasser. Listen to what Democratic Congressman Diana DeGette of Colorado says former Congressman Bob Filner, a California Democrat, tried to do while they were both serving in the House.
I was in an elevator, and then Congressman Bob Filner tried to pin me to the door of the elevator and kiss me, and I pushed him away. And believe you me, I never got in an elevator with him again. But what concerns me now, which should concern everybody, is what about the young staffers? What about the interns? Was this happening with them too? And I think we have to ask ourselves the question, is this happening with current members of Congress?
Meantime, Congresswoman Jackie Speier of California and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York are introducing legislation to overhaul the system currently available to congressional staff for reporting sexual misconduct. Their bill would aim to make things more transparent by eliminating the mandatory non-disclosure agreements currently in place. Tough to decide where to start here, but there is a lot going on. Maria, I'll actually ask you about this first. The $17 million paid out over a 20-year period of time that we're learning, the federal government on these claims.
And that's taxpayer dollars. We don't have any insight into who those claims were paid to or why. We need transparency here in the halls of Congress. And I think if we've learned anything from covering the story over the last weeks and months is that this is just the beginning. And every day now, it feels like there are new accusations, whether it's in Congress. Look, I think Congress, there are a lot of members, current and former, who are nervous right now, thinking back over things they've done. Women are now feeling comfortable speaking out, whether it's the media, whether it's politics. I mean, we are reckoning in this country with how do we sift through this? How do we decide who should resign and who shouldn't? We're all going through this together as a culture, and it's been a really tough few weeks.
And you wonder if this is the moment, Pete,
right.
that this was coming. Here we are. Is this a step in the right direction?
I think it is, and I think it's poignant that Conyers is the longest-serving congressman. Right? It's sort of the old guard, right, is the first in the beginning of what probably is even more, not probably, you talk to Hill staffers, there's an understanding that a lot more is coming here.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I mean, what you have is the reckoning of the unwanted advances and a power dynamic. And when you have that and you can get away with it because of a process that has automatic non-disclosure agreements. Listen, there are perfectly reasonable reasons in the corporate world and in politics to use non-disclosure agreements. Maybe you've got grievances between two parties and you don't want it to go public. But if it's mandatory in a process and you've got that power dynamic and you've got female staffers who feel uncomfortable, that does create some disincentives that need to be corrected. So I do think there is a reckoning coming here and a lot of things. Capitol Hill's played by its own rules for a long time on a lot of levels, carving themselves out of Obamacare or whatever it is. They don't get to carve themselves out.
And we are starting to see measures taken in the halls of Congress. I mean, announcements that there will be mandatory training on identifying sexual harassment. What is sexual harassment? Trish.
Kind of amazing that you need that, right? Sometimes it just should boil down to human decency and what is the right thing to do. And, you know, if a woman is not responding to your advances, you know, do you continue that? I mean, no. But, you know, it's important, you know, as a mother of two daughters, too, I think about it in their future. They shouldn't have to put up with no woman should have to put up with any of this, period.
Amen.
And if it takes classes and disclosure for this to come out, good. I mean, you should clean up every industry that needs cleaning up because it's not acceptable. You shouldn't be doing that.
Well, the crux of this for me is the fact that that $17 million is our money. It's taxpayer money, and there doesn't seem to be anyone, including leadership, that had any idea that all this stuff was going on. So that's the issue here, is the fact that this is our money, so we deserve transparency in the way that that is being spent. I also think that, you know, look, these are conversations, sadly, we're going to continue to have. This is going to touch every industry around the country. And what I also worry about is the fact that while these conversations are important and we should be having them, I also worry that people are going to get swept up in this that maybe didn't do anything wrong. And so there needs to be due process, there needs to be mechanisms, there needs to be investigations to ensure that the people that are committing these acts are being weeded out. I also think we need to celebrate good men in this country as well. And you have people like Vice President Mike Pence, who was ridiculed for saying that he won't go out to dinner alone with a woman out of respect for his wife. That's an agreement that him and his wife share together, and he was ridiculed for it. But we should be celebrating good men that love and respect their wife. And while that might not be for every marriage, we should respect those men that love and respect their own wives.
By the way, what we do know, when talking about that $17 million, 264 settlements and awards dealt specifically with cases of sexual misconduct brought by legislative branch employees. Some of the cases, they went on to say, may involve violations of multiple statutes.
I think Lisa raises a great point. You have to take each one on a case-by-case basis. A lot of the ones we're seeing right now are the most egregious, obvious, forcing time and time again the power dynamic. What you don't want is a situation where there's a really ambiguous situation. Did it happen? Did it not happen? Was it consensual? Was it not? That kind of thing. But then it gets tried in the court of public opinion, and that person could be tarred or not tarred hard, even though the facts may or may not be
So
there.
you could run into a Salem witch trial
Yeah,
kind
you
of thing.
got
where,
to get
people
it
can
right
just
because this is
make
so serious.
accusations.
And you can't have that, but at the same time, I think we also have to make sure we're careful with the way we report it and talk about it.
And that's incumbent upon institutions as well to make sure that they are doing their own reviews. They are, looking at this very carefully and making sure that accusations are, accurate and they're taking the proper recourse.
All right, another Fox News alert for you. Voters heading to the polls 3 weeks from today in Alabama's special election to elect a new senator. This as the White House says President Trump's position has not changed on Republican candidate Roy Moore, who stands accused of improper behavior and sexual conduct with teens. The White House saying Alabama voters should decide his fate. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders.
Obviously, the president wants people, both in the House and the Senate, that support his agenda. But as I've said, and as the Hatch Act prohibits me from going any further, we certainly think that this is something that the people of Alabama should decide.
Meantime, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says Moore's candidacy could sink the Republican agenda.
We're about to give away a seat that can determine the future of Trump's agenda. And I hope the good people of Alabama on the Republican side will try to find a way to pick a nominee that can represent the conservative cause in an effective way.
Senator Graham also says he's in favor of a maneuver that would trigger a new special election. Moore continues to deny all of the allegations against him. So it looks like for the time being, Pete, he's going to try to ride out this storm heading into the election. And
I hear what Senator Graham has to say, but he doesn't get to choose. Neither do I, neither do you, neither does anybody else. The people of Alabama will ultimately get to decide who represents them in Washington. And that's not to apologize for a single accusation, even though Roy Moore has denied it. If they decide on Election Day to go in there, either enthusiastically holding their nose or because they want the Trump agenda advanced, that's their right to do so. And I don't think we should have leaders in a distant capital getting to say, no, you're acceptable, but you're not. That's, if we had done that, we would never have had Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio or Mike Lee, a lot of these insurgent candidacies, and that has nothing to do with misbehavior. I know we're talking about something differently here, but why do the elites get to choose? Let the people choose, and if they choose to replace them, they can do that.
Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is up to the Alabama voters. I mean, they're the ones that have this information in front of them, so they have to make the decision when they head to the polls on Election Day of which candidate they're going to decide to choose. I mean, I do also think you can also put it in the hands of Alabama, which personally I think the recourse that Alabama and the governor of Alabama needs to do is you can also change the date of the special election to a later date to allow for more time to dissect this information and for voters to be able to digest it and figure it out. So personally, if I could make the call, that's what I would want the Alabama governor to do. Hope she's listening.
Murray.
I think this is a tough one, right? Because the White House, it seems like they've changed a little bit. They first said if these are true, he should step out of the race. They're not saying that anymore. Now they're saying, let the voters decide. So they have switched their position a little bit. And, you're right that I don't think politically it works for national parties to come in and impose their will on the states. But if the Republican Party in the state, and they're not doing this, but let's say they said, we don't want him to be our nominee on the ballot, would you feel differently about that?
I would feel differently. I would. Just like in Minnesota, if the DFL party said, we don't want Al Franken anymore, that's different than the Democratic National Committee saying,
right,
or Senatorial Committee saying we don't want him.
So
I do think local is more important.
But there's also this is a question of, yes, the voters can decide, should we hold our public officials to a higher standard than just will vote for. I think we all agree, yes.
So to be clear, I think that the White House position has changed. Sarah Sanders very clearly just said the president's position on this has not changed.
But then she said
he was traveling in Asia when this came out. They did issue a statement, said if these allegations are true, he should step aside. At this point, I believe the White House is saying, clearly, he's not stepping aside. Mm-hmm. Voters need to decide at this point.
Yeah, so it's up to the voters in this case. And then I guess if he actually gets the spot, then they can deal with that maybe in D.C. because there have been some threats that they would not allow him.
So that we can deal with that. D.C. gets to come in and
I don't necessarily think that's right, but that's what I think the plan is. That said, I question why some conservatives would want him. All this other stuff aside with the young women, he has not really been someone who's upheld the Constitution in his career, and I think that's a big problem for a lot of conservatives, and his political opponents perhaps would be wiser to put that out there more so than all these allegations, because the court record he has, that you can prove.
Lisa, could you further weigh in on what's at stake
Conservative activists.
politically? I mean, you heard Lindsey Graham's take on all this, but what's at stake as far as President Trump and his agenda going forward with this race?
Well, the concern of many Republicans, including people like Senator Lindsey Graham, and even I'm sure the president behind the scenes, is the fact that with the Republican Party, everything gets attached to them because you have the mainstream media that's going to go out every single day and basically say, do you agree with Roy Moore? Do you agree with he did? That never happens with the left. Look at any election. This always happens on the right because the mainstream media,
They're facing
as we know,
right now.
But statistically, they side with the left.
Because they're not mainstream. They're left-wing.
Yes, and so the Republican Party is concerned that this is going to dog them if Roy Moore is duly elected to the United States Senate, that this is going to dog them every single day, that reporters are going to come up to them, that this is all that is going to be written about, and it's going to suck up all the auction and make it very, very difficult to concentrate on things like tax reform and some of these other, agenda items. So I think that is the concern that they're looking at.
Ooh, all right. President Trump stepping up his pressure campaign on North Korea, naming it a state sponsor of terror. Whether this will help curb the rogue regime's nuclear aggression. Plus, administration officials firing back after a federal judge slams the door on the president's attempt to cut funding to sanctuary cities. Why the White House is still confident it will win this legal battle.
To cut funding to sanctuary cities that refuse to comply with federal immigration authorities. The California judge ruling that the order is unconstitutional and infringes on the 5th and 10th Amendments. The Trump administration firing back, defending the president in this statement, and I quote, "The flawed district court ruling undercuts the president's efforts to keep the American people safe and secure by enforcing existing law. We are confident the courts will ultimately uphold the president's lawful and necessary authority." All this as closing arguments are wrapping up in the murder trial of Kate Steinle, the case that started the whole sanctuary city debate. Steinle was shot and killed, you recall, in San Francisco by an illegal immigrant who was set to be deported for a 6th time before her death, but was allowed anyway to stay under the city's sanctuary policies. You've kind of said this is a no-brainer, and I agree with you, Pete. It seems to me that the President of the United States should have the ability to protect the American people. And if he thinks that there is an issue with someone who is here illegally and that person needs to be deported, how is it that a city can come in and say, no, they're fine to stay here?
Again, I mean, it's the common sense of this presidency that he's attacked things that have gone so far in the wrong direction. We're just course correcting. A city or a county or a state says, we're going to ignore federal law. So then the federal government says, well, then you might not get all the funding that you want unless you comply. And what I think one of the biggest wake-up calls for this administration has been how powerful activist judges can be in this country. Pick a certain court, pick a circuit court, bring a grievance, get a temporary stay or a permanent stay, and then you got to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court and in the court of public opinion. That's why you've seen this White House work really hard to get young, conservative judges confirmed throughout the courts, and that will be a big legacy of this presidency. Until then, it's going to have to wait until this is challenged to the Supreme Court, and hopefully the administration can win.
Well, I would think at the Supreme Court level, the administration absolutely would win. Because you're talking about the ability of our president, Marie, to protect the people.
Well, that's the general theory, right? We will see legally if this order and what he wanted to do complies with the law. And if it doesn't, they should fix it so it does, right? I mean, that's the point.
But that happened with the travel ban, and they've had to refine it 3 times, and an activist judge has stopped it every time.
And I went through the Obama administration where people brought suit in states with activist judges on the conservative side against Obamacare, and everything we were doing that did the same thing to us. It happens on both sides. Doesn't mean it's right. It happens on both sides. So this will continue to be litigated. The real answer, of course, and this won't happen because Congress is incapable of doing much right now, is for Congress to do a comprehensive look at immigration, including these kinds of issues, to fix it legislatively so we're not fighting this out in the courts.
Or a 1-by-1. I mean, the comprehensive stuff usually means amnesty, but there's a lot of popular things that are common sense. You could probably pick some Democrats off and get a lot of Republican support.
But Congress, I have no illusions that Congress will actually act responsibly and try to move on this, because ultimately we don't want to be fighting this out in the courts. We don't want cities to be operating on different rules.
Federal law trump this? No pun intended, Lisa? I mean, like, if the federal government's saying one thing, how as a city do you come along and say something entirely different and then still expect to be receiving federal funding.
Well, exactly. And I also think that it's incredibly disheartening at a time where the Kate Steinle case is ongoing right now. And you look at someone like Jim Steinle, who lost his daughter to an illegal immigrant who was never supposed to be here in the first place, that was supposed to be deported for the 6th time. So a horrible case from someone who wasn't even supposed to be here. And in regarding the judicial aspect of this as well, President Trump has been criticized for his judicial blitz and trying to reshape the federal court system, which is positive, to try to change it in a more conservative bent. We also saw the confirmation, obviously, of Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, which is a positive thing for conservatives as well. But to Marie's point also, this is going to be a heavily litigated presidency, just like with President Obama. We're going to continuously see his policies be put to test in the court system.
But is that just obstructionist? Are they just trying to make it difficult for this administration? Because it doesn't feel to me like you're asking for the moon if you say we have laws here and we have borders here in our country, and everyone needs to respect those laws and our borders.
I just wonder, if you were to bring this conversation back to a very basic and simple level, Maria, about sanctuary cities. I spoke, Bill and I had Marsha Blackburn on the America's Newsroom earlier, and she was adamant, not only we need this. This is essential, this crackdown from the president on these sanctuary cities in this country right now. And I just wonder how you respond to situations like we're seeing in Chicago and some of these cities that are dealing with really, really tragic, violent, their current state is not good. You've got Rahm Emanuel promising residents of that city, you are safe here, telling illegal immigrants, you are safe here. I mean, how do you address just the problem that is sanctuary cities right now?
I think it's a challenge because in some of these cities you have police forces and law enforcement who will say, we need even illegal immigrants to feel comfortable speaking out when they're trying to report crimes that are committed. So you have police forces in some, now liberals have taken that and run with it.
Of course.
But it is a fact that some police forces say, wait a second, we don't love the concept of sanctuary cities writ large, but we need to find a way for even illegal immigrants to be able to report crimes in their community. Both sides of the political aisle go to their corners in this and prevent someone, like you said, Sandra, or what Trish said, from actually using common sense and meeting in the middle. That's where we need to be.
I would note that the illegal immigrant reporting it is already illegal. So, I mean, we've lost the meaning of the word, what it means to be here illegal.
Yeah, it's fair.
That's a good point.
Good point. All right. The stunning new scandal rocking the media world. Veteran newsman Charlie Rose suspended after 8 women come forward alleging sexual misconduct at the workplace going back years. The reaction from his CBS co-hosts as the floodgates open on sexual harassment in the media, in politics, and in Hollywood.
This is a moment that demands a frank and honest assessment about where we stand and, more generally, the safety of women.
Stunning new allegations again rocking the media world. CBS's flagship morning show without one of its hosts today. The network initially suspending Charlie Rose over sexual misconduct allegations, and now we are just learning that he has been fired. 8 women who came forward to the Washington Post accused the veteran newsman of various misconduct, including groping, walking naked in front of them, and telling one of them he dreamed about her swimming nude. The women, ranging in ages from 21 to 37, were employees or sought to work for Rose at the Charlie Rose Show, which airs on PBS. Says a former assistant, quote, "It has taken 10 years and a fierce moment of cultural reckoning for me to understand these moments for what they were. He was a sexual predator, and I was his victim." In a statement, Rose says in part, quote, "It is essential that these women know I hear them and that I deeply apologize for my inappropriate behavior. I am greatly embarrassed. I have behaved insensitively at times, and I accept responsibility for that, though I do not believe that all these allegations are accurate. I always felt that I was pursuing shared feelings, even though I now realize I was mistaken." Meantime, it made for a remarkable and emotional moment when Rose's female co-host tackled the controversy head on at the start of today's show. Watch.
This is a moment that demands a frank and honest assessment about where we stand and, more generally, the safety of women. Let me be very clear. There is no excuse for this alleged behavior. It is systematic, and pervasive. And I've been doing a lot of listening, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Charlie does not get a pass here. He doesn't get a pass from anyone in this room. We are all deeply affected. We are all rocked by this. And I want to echo what Nora said. I really applaud the women that speak up despite the friendship. He doesn't get a pass because I can't stop thinking about the anguish of these women.
The Rhodes controversy arose the same day as the New York Times suspended star political reporter Glenn Thrush for an apparent pattern of hitting on and groping young female colleagues. All right, so this is just breaking. Charlie Rose now fired by CBS. I'll open that one up to you, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, obviously powerful. Obviously, he's been a titan of the media world for a long time. But just like Conyers in the first segment, where we talked about folks that have been in an institution for years and maybe thought they were playing by a certain set of rules that were acceptable, again, because of the power dynamic at play. Unwanted was okay in their mind. And the day of reckoning has come. And I thought Nora O'Donnell and Gayle King handled it very well. How else do you do it other than to take it straight on?
CBS saying this a short time ago. They terminated Charlie Rose. This following the revelation yesterday of extremely disturbing and intolerable behavior said to have revolved around his PBS program.
Right. Wow. For me, one of the most disturbing parts of the Charlie Rose story, and we may actually hear more about this in other cases, is that his executive producer is a woman. I do not know her, but she apparently had been hearing over many years from many women, including some in the story, who said they reported to her that this behavior was happening. She, I think, released a statement last night saying she wished she'd done more. But, you know, we all talk on this couch a lot about how women need to look out for each other. We need to stick up for each other. That's a part of this story that for some reason really bothered me, that she was hearing from young women. Yeah. And apparently didn't do anything about it. How do you, I just don't understand, honestly.
I mean, yes, and I think as we dissect this in the coming days and weeks, women need to do more to stick up for other women for sure in the workplace. But gosh darn it, Charlie never should have done that to begin with. You know, I mean, like, this is just, it's so horrific that kind of behavior from any individual existed to begin with. But, you know, the idea that there's then a mechanism for it to be enforced and he has people around him that are enforcing that behavior or allowing that behavior, it's a problem. And we're seeing increasingly it's a problem in a lot of places, Lisa.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, I feel like the common denominator in all of this is the fact that people exploit power. And we're saying that it doesn't matter the industry, if it's Hollywood, if it's media, if it's Congress, you know, regardless. Comedy, yeah, whatever the industry is, it's that people exploit power. We see this, you know, and other things as well, with members of Congress being indicted for, you know, all these other different charges for, you know, corruption and money going certain places from campaign accounts and things of that nature. But people exploit power, and it's wrong.
I'm just now having a chance to read through the memo that was sent out to CBS staffers shortly following the firing of Charlie Rose a few moments ago. The New York Times obtained it. I've got it in front of me. In it, towards the middle, it says, I've often heard that things used to be different and no one may be able to correct the past, but what may have once been accepted should not ever have been acceptable, which is an interesting way to approach that.
Well, I think it's this challenge we're all going through, that maybe there used to be different rules, doesn't make it okay, but we are seeing across multiple industries, as Lisa said, there were men in power who somehow felt protected, that they weren't going to get punished. So we're going back and reevaluating incidents that sometimes happened 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And we're looking at them in this current light of our situation and trying to make sense of all of it. So I think that's actually a really interesting line that they put in there.
You know, it was, you read that article there in the Washington Post. I mean, the idea that producers were coming over his apartment, that he's taking showers. I mean, I said with the Harvey Weinstein story, well, why would you go to someone's hotel room for a job interview or for a meeting? That just seems weird. In this case, you've got Charlie bringing producers over to his apartment, and I think that there needs to be more of a distinction between church and state, so to speak, in the workplace. And maybe, you know, you're not taking a shower when your producer's knocking on the door. I mean, it's bizarre behavior.
You know what I mean?
Speaking to that, that is what his former employer, now CBS, also detailed in that statement. He has been fired for extremely disturbing and intolerable behavior. We'll leave it there. We are learning more about that Obama-era Uranium One deal as The Hill is reporting new revelations about what an informant told the FBI before the deal went down. Information said to conflict with statements made by officials in the past. Whether it's time for a special counsel to investigate this.
Justice Department officials are going to brief lawmakers on the Obama-era Uranium One deal next week. This is the Hill's reporting on new revelations about what an informant told the FBI before the deal went down in 2010. That information reportedly conflicts with statements the Justice Department officials have made before that the informant's work would not shed light on the decision to approve Russia's purchase of Uranium One. Documents obtained by the Hill show that the FBI had evidence of criminality well before the Obama administration approved Russia's purchase of Uranium One. They also suggest the purchase was a strategy to make the United States more reliant on Russian-owned raw materials. And they showed the Russians were exporting Uranium One out of the country, contrary to reports that no uranium was exported. This after President Trump's son, Eric Trump, called for a special counsel to investigate the deal, saying there is more than enough proof something fishy happened.
Are people really naive enough to believe that somebody gave Hillary Clinton, right, a Secretary of State at the time, $145 million for her foundation for nothing? I mean, do people really believe that? And to me, it's such a travesty that that's not being investigated, because there is something there, and it smells and it looks horrible. And personally, I don't believe that somebody would give $145 million for nothing to Hillary Clinton, to a government official at the time.
So obviously there's a lot of different directions to go with this, and there's a lot to unpack with so much information. But Pete, I want to start with you. As Justice Department officials are going to brief Congress next week, we're finding out some conflicting information with things that the DOJ has said, trying to downplay the information that this informant has. Also, we're finding out that the FBI knew about this scheme before the deal was approved. So from your perspective, what answers do you hope Congress gets?
Well, I'm going to guess that the Clinton and Obama camps, their defense is going to be say, hey, simply that the right hand wasn't talking to the left hand, that the decision makers didn't have all the information. If this truly was a pending investigation into Russia getting their hands into our energy sector, would that not be something we wouldn't want to happen, and would that not color our decision making? I think that's really important. But the other angle that works against that a lot is that suddenly Russia became very charitable to one certain foundation, and that wasn't a couple $100,000, it was $145 million to people directly tied to this. And it may have been she may have been only one part of a decision-making process.
I don't think she was any part of it.
She's a really big part of it. If it's not her, she knows a lot of people. She knows a lot of people in government, has a lot of influence in government, can have plenty of side conversations or have other people have them for her.
She didn't know anything about it, you said?
Having worked at the State Department, well, no, but having worked at the State Department, CFIUS decisions, which is this committee that decides these decisions, are almost always, if not always, made way below the Secretary of State's level. I would be shocked, and we have seen no evidence that Hillary Clinton herself was a part of this decision. And the CFIUS people...
But you don't see any evidence overall? I mean, you're talking about specific...
I have not seen one shred of evidence that Hillary Clinton herself was involved in the State Department's decision to sign off on this.
So, but
and
her
believe
team
me,
was,
and
if her team wasn't,
State Department employees don't care about who gives money to the Clinton Foundation.
Standpoint. You were in the State Department. Perhaps there's just a pure incompetence there under Hillary Clinton, where they don't know about these things. She should have known something about this. You know who else should have known something about this? Eric Holder, because his own FBI was conducting an investigation into how the Russians were trying to gain an outsized influence into our uranium supply and sector. And the company that was doing this acquisition was called ARMZ Uranium Holdings. And then it was owned entirely by the Russian state atomic energy company. So these are those little red flags where, you know, you say, oh, she didn't know anything, she wasn't responsible. Well, then that's pure bureaucracy. Everyone should have known.
But my point, Lisa, my point is that's how bureaucracy works. And so we can say the deal shouldn't have been approved. We can say we want answers. We can all agree on that. But the idea of then saying, shouldn't Hillary Clinton be held accountable because she got bribed into taking money to approve this, that is a conspiracy theory where there is no evidence.
Answers.
It's $145 million. It's going to the foundation.
But there's no evidence that impacted the decision.
But this was also something
that without evidence.
This was also something that
you're not going to write an email that says, please do this so that we can. I mean, I understand that. That's
please meet with the Russian government. I mean, people.
How do you respond to the FBI informant who, now that we know his name because Reuters put it out there. I interviewed the lawyer this morning,
Yes,
Victoria
I saw.
Tinsing, for the informant. Well, what did you think about that? She says that there is hard evidence, there is tape that goes back to 2010 and reveals hard evidence of corruption here.
So I think we should hear from the informant. I've always said that, and I think we will. And Congress will soon be hearing from him, I believe. So we should hear, we should get some answers, but we need to be careful saying this is either a bad deal or Hillary Clinton is guilty of some special counsel-like corruption.
There's no
evidence of that, Pete.
$145 million going to the Clinton.
There's no evidence of that.
Well, you agree she never should have taken that money.
This was also
because if nothing else, you're going to ask these questions.
That's a different question.
And this was also something that President Obama was concerned about, and having Hillary Clinton serve as a Secretary of State and still have the Clinton Foundation ongoing. So clearly this was something he was worried about, and there are national security implications here. But moving on, President Trump's big move to get North Korea to abandon its nuclear program. Will it work? And does it step up pressure on China? We'll debate. You're going to want to watch.
Today, the United States is designating North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. Should have happened a long time ago. Should have happened years ago.